In today's Farm Report, 2014 was a bumper year for crop and livestock producers alike, but this year was more of a break-even year, and Jim Salfer with the University of Minnesota Extension Service Office says that 2016 will probably be more of the same, which may mean having to visit with your lender. Jim offers some good tips to evaluate your finances.
Looks like the super cycle of the crop production is kind of over, and even dairy producers, after the good year of 2014, 2015 was kind of a break-even year for most of our dairy producers, and it looks like 2016 is kind of more of the same. Matter of fact, I think the first quarter of 2016 right now looks like it might be a little tougher year than maybe even last year was. So many farmers are going to be going in and visiting with their lenders, and here's some things you might want to be thinking about as you go into your lenders, or even as you're evaluating your own financial situation. I think one thing it's important to put in perspective is look at trends and profitability over time. A lot of producers, when the entire industry is having a tough year, really are going to have a substandard year, at least for them. But look at long term. Has your profitability continued to be in the top half or so of producers? Can you kind of stay in business and say most of the time that you're pretty profitable? It was really easy for crop producers to make money from 2007 to 2012 or maybe even 2013. But even if you were making money and you were kind of in the bottom end of that, maybe you kind of need to rethink some of your management strategies. And I'm not talking, unfortunately, so many producers rely on cash accounting and really look at their Schedule F or their taxable situation, or their tax situation, and I'm not talking about that. I think any producers that are out there that want to be in business long term really need to look at an accrual accounting system, because I think it makes a lot of sense for everyone to try and minimize their taxes. But that sometimes makes your business either look worse, or you could possibly even look better in some years if you're holding a lot of inventory and sell it the next year. May look like you made money when in reality you may have not. So please consider an accrual accounting system. The other thing is make sure you look at your trend, long-term trend on your balance sheet. We've had a lot of awful increases in land over the last 10 years, and if that continues to go on your balance sheet, it may make your balance sheet actually look better than maybe your profitability shows. So try to look at the value of your balance sheet based on the profits that come out of the business, not from, maybe I shouldn't say an inflated balance sheet, but a balance sheet that's really driven by an increase in the value of those assets, which of course is primarily going to be land. And I think if you do that and you look at your situation, you can go into your lender and say, long term, I've been profitable, this is what I've added to my net worth. I think most lenders are going to be real comfortable in working with you, even if you maybe are not going to have a good year going into 2016. This has been Jim Salfer with the University of Minnesota Extension in St. Cloud.
Minnesota's ag profile is something that many people don't take a look at, but as Jim Salfer with the University of Minnesota Extension Service Office points out, it is a good way to track where we rank nationally.
Have you ever wondered where Minnesota ranks kind of nationally from an ag profile list? I think I spend, and other people spend, a lot of time talking about the importance of agriculture in Minnesota, but I think until you put it in perspective of where we kind of rank nationally, I don't think you recognize how big agriculture really is. When you look at Minnesota, we've got about 5.5 million people or so in Minnesota. Actually, about 3/4 of those actually live in urban areas, and only about 25% live in the rural areas. So again, we don't have that many people, but we do have 27 million acres of farmland, and so over half of the entire farmland in Minnesota is actually considered agricultural land. And so even though people-wise, it's not a lot of people, but it really does control a fair amount of the land mass. We've got about 81,000 farms, and contrary to what you maybe think about or hear about on the news, the average farm size now is still about 350 acres. So we hear, all these farmers must have 2, 3, 4, 5,000 acres. It's really not the situation. Actually, our average farm size is about 350 acres. Minnesota ranks 6th nationally as far as ag exporting data, and we're not too far from second. The biggest state in the union, as you might guess, is California at about $13 billion. Minnesota is $5 billion, and second place is actually Iowa at $7 billion. So they really kind of flatten out after you get to California, and there's a lot of similarities, but we do rank sixth in that area. And when you look at kind of the livestock versus cropping area, we're number 4 in cash crop receipts, we're number 5 in total ag receipts, and we're number 7 in livestock. And when you look nationally, we're number 1 in turkeys. Of course, a lot of those here are kind of right here in central Minnesota. We're number 3 in hogs. We're number 5 in mink. I wouldn't think of Minnesota as much of a mink industry, but it's because the mink industry nationally is pretty small. And number 6, this is a couple years old, but we're number 6 in milk, red meat, and cheese. And so we've really done a nice job. And you look at Minnesota's agricultural industry all over, it's a fairly large industry and pretty well balanced. When you look at the mix, about 60% of our cash or our income comes from crops, and about 41% comes from livestock, and so reasonably well balanced. And I think that's why our dairy or our ag industry is fairly resilient. We've got a lot of different species spread out throughout the entire state. It's kind of balanced between crops and livestock. So typically maybe one crop or one livestock is good. Maybe the other ones aren't quite so good. I know that doesn't help individual farms, but as an entire industry, it really adds some resilience to our scope nationwide and keeping our entire ag industry fairly strong. This has been Jim Selfer with the University of Minnesota Extension in St. Cloud.
Another month of low placements into cattle feedlots and low marketings out of them. Friday's USDA Cattle on Feed report showing October feedlot placements down 4% from a year ago, marketings down 3% and the lowest in at least 19 years. USDA livestock analyst Shale Shagam gave us a couple of reasons for those low numbers.
Returns for feedlot operators have been very, very poor. Most of them have been experiencing quite significant losses, and they're just unwilling or unable to pay the kind of prices that were needed to bring feeder calves into the feedlots. Conversely, cow-calf operators or backgrounders, those who are holding the cattle on grass prior to placement, had sufficient supplies of forage and were not in a very large hurry, apparently, to sell those cattle to the feedlot operators at lower prices.
And fed steers this week are averaging $123 a hundredweight. A year ago at this time, prices were in the 160s. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.